Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're breaking down a fascinatingly complex, deeply troubling, and often totally misunderstood organization, the Sinaloa Cartel. We're going to map out the staggering scale and the absolutely devastating local reality of this group. By taking a macro to micro approach, as you'll see, we're looking at how this isn't just your standard criminal syndicate. No, it's an entirely self-sustaining ecosystem that touches absolutely everything in its path.
Okay, let's dive into this. $3 to $12 billion. That is the estimated annual revenue generated by the cartel through the international trafficking of opium, cocaine, cannabis, and fentanyl. To put that into perspective, if this cartel were a legitimate legal corporation, its balance sheet would easily rival major multinational companies. It is an absolute economic powerhouse, just operating entirely outside the law.
And to protect an enterprise of that sheer magnitude, you need some serious manpower. 100,000. That's the estimated number of sicarios, or hitmen, operating as the cartel's private army. We're not talking about a loosely affiliated street gang here. This is a highly militarized force. And it's a fractured one, too, with rival clans constantly fighting for control over territory right from within the organization itself.
But we really can't look at the massive wealth and the manpower without facing the devastating toll it takes. 230,000. That is the sheer number of people killed in Mexico's drug war since 2006, which is when the state, backed by the U.S., actively began trying to eradicate these groups. It's an immense human cost, and it really forms the dark foundation of those billion-dollar revenues.
Section 1. A global criminal empire centrally based out of Culiacan, Sinaloa.
To actually grasp how this operates on the ground, we have to recognize that those billions of dollars don't just sit hidden away in briefcases somewhere. To be useful, that money has to be washed. So the cartel pumps its profits directly back into the local economy of Culiacan. They invest heavily in real estate, building luxury villas, sprawling shopping malls, and everyday local businesses. This completely entangles standard daily life and legitimate commerce with narco wealth.
Because of that deep economic entanglement, we see this incredible ripple effect. Over 200,000 people are estimated to work directly or indirectly for the drug lords. And this goes far beyond the sicarios carrying heavy weapons. We're talking about local pharmacists who import the precursor chemicals necessary to manufacture synthetic drugs. It's just a massive, fully integrated workforce.
Section 2. The economics of opium and fentanyl.
Let's look at the actual products driving this massive empire, and how the market has ruthlessly evolved from the agricultural opium boom of the early 2000s to today's synthetic fentanyl crisis. Take an opium farmer like Manuel, who harvests poppy fields to make heroin. This earns him about 6,000 euros net per year. Now that might not sound like much, but it's double the average Mexican salary. It is an incredibly powerful financial incentive to stay in the illicit economy. Yet Manuel notes that this actually is a massive drop. It's about a third less than what he made during the peak era of the infamous El Chapo.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why those agricultural profits are dropping: the shift to fentanyl. A single synthetic pill costs less than $1 to manufacture in Mexico, but when it's trafficked into the United States, it is sold at a 15 to 30 times markup. Interestingly, the cartel actually strictly bans the sale and use of fentanyl locally in Sinaloa due to its devastating bodily effects. Instead, they fiercely push it to the U.S., where it tragically kills over 30,000 people every single year.
Let's walk through exactly how this synthetic gold mine is produced, as observed through the lens of a cartel hitman and chef known as El Go. It's basically a three-step decentralized supply chain. First, the fentanyl is cooked in hidden, remote, rural labs. Next, entirely separate, highly specialized teams press the powder into pills. Finally, convoys equipped with heavy, military-grade weapons transport the drugs. They primarily do this fearing rival cartels and the military who, unlike the local police, are notoriously difficult to corrupt.
Section 3. A state within a state.
So what happens when this cartel's operations are directly threatened by a sovereign government? Well, the events of October 17th provide a pretty stunning timeline of power. At 3 p.m., Mexican police captured Ovidio Guzman, El Chapo's son. The response was immediate. By mid-afternoon, anywhere from 200 to 800 heavily armed sicarios descended on the city. They attacked with machine guns mounted on pickup trucks and even freed prisoners from maximum security jails. The violence was so overwhelming that by 5:30 p.m., the president of Mexico ordered Ovidio's release, simple to stop a total bloodbath.
But the cartel didn't just win the battle that day. They sent a terrifying message for the future. A few days later, chilling CCTV footage captured the assassination of a police officer who had been involved in Ovidio's arrest. 4 sicarios fired 150 bullets into the officer in just 6 seconds. It was a highly calculated, utterly brutal execution designed as a permanent deterrent against any authority attempting to arrest top drug bosses.
Section 4. The Narco Economy.
Let's zoom in from that macro-level violence and look at the absolute disparity of the everyday civilian reality on the streets of Culiacan. In the narco economy, dead cartel members are buried in the pantheon of narcos, inside VIP tombs that cost up to $500,000, complete with armored windows and surveillance cameras. Compare that to the civilian economy. The minimum wage in Culiacan is just 120 euros a month. You have 17-year-old high school students, like a kid named Luis, living in houses without running water, working all day at a fruit stand for just 5 to 10 euros. That crushing poverty makes the wealth of the cartel an incredibly powerful recruitment tool. The cultural impact of this massive wealth gap is profound. For a lot of young women, catching the eye of a wealthy trafficker is seen as a direct escape from misery. They frequent luxury clubs trying to emulate narco tastes. The culture is so intense and dangerous that high school girls will literally seek out local witches to undergo purification sessions and black magic rituals, often praying to Santa Muerte, the goddess of death, just to safely navigate the volatile reality of dating a narco.
Now, what's really interesting about this extreme environment is how it creates these bizarre, dark industries. Crime literally drives legitimate municipal business. Take this quote from Santos, a local funeral home salesman. Because the murder rate is so staggeringly high, the 5 big funeral homes in Culiacan are in a fierce race against each other. Santos and his team listen to police scanners to get tip-offs about killings, literally racing to active crime scenes, and even waiting at local morgues to try and sell funeral contracts to grieving families.
Section 5. The Human Cost.
Beyond the billions of dollars and the cultural spectacles, we absolutely have to look at the localized, entirely tragic human reality left in the wake of this ecosystem. Volunteers, parents like a woman named Isabel, literally searched the countryside with pickaxes looking for underground mass graves. Isabel lost her police officer's son to cartel violence. Now, relying on anonymous tip-offs slipped under her door by individuals close to the cartels, she hunts for bodies hidden under heavy stone blocks, just trying to bring some closure to grieving families.
And the sheer need for those searches is staggering. 26,000. That is the number of unidentified dead currently sitting in the country's morgues. Families constantly visit these forensic centers hoping to recognize a loved one from a photograph. And tragically, in Mexico, only 2 out of every 100 crimes are ever actually solved, meaning justice is incredibly rare. Add to that the number 44,000. That is the recorded number of disappearances in the country over just the last decade. A vast majority of these missing individuals are youth. This sheer volume of people who simply vanish into this violent ecosystem paints a horrifying picture of a generation basically being hollowed out. Finally, let's just look at the death toll from the year 2019 alone. 35,000 lives lost. It marked the deadliest year in Mexico since the war on drugs began. But here is the most jarring takeaway. While this unimaginable scale of death completely wreaks havoc on families and local society, the cartel's tens of billions of dollars in profits continue to flow almost completely untouched. Which brings us to the end of our analysis, leaving us with this vital, provocative question. How does a criminal enterprise become so deeply embedded in a society's fabric? When you have a multi-billion-dollar illicit economy crashing headfirst into extreme systemic poverty, you stop looking at a gang and you start looking at an entire ecosystem that has woven itself into the very survival of a region. It forces us to entirely rethink how we view the war on drugs. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it provided you with a clear, structured understanding of a truly complex reality. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.